Hey everyone. Oh, it's like I haven't used my voice in a while. If there's no camera on me, I just don't talk. I'm just kidding. Hi, welcome to the Evening Reader. I'm Priscilla. Welcome or welcome back. Uh, how are you out there? It has been a little while. Um, I finally finished that Dutch class. For those of you who didn't know, I live in the Netherlands and I have been taking Dutch lessons so I can take my, it's called the inburgering exam, which is to help uh, to help me get to establish permanent EU residence in the Netherlands. So class over. I had my exam last night, so that was exciting. But that class, boy, I tell you, when you haven't gone to school in a long time, like very, very long time, um, it you forget like how much it kind of takes over. And it was fun. It was really, I enjoyed it. It was only the first level. Um, and I think that's all that I need for my exam, but I probably will take another level or two just for just to learn more and to get a little bit more immersed in it. But this was like the serious business of these are the things I have to know. And so getting back into studying and also having a foreign language really sort of taking up brain space. Um, when it's not something that's just like, oh, I need to go, I'm going on vacation and it would be fun if I could order in that language. It's like, I already know how to order in Dutch, but I have to like be able to have more of a conversation and read a lot more and understand a lot more. So anyway, I won't go on about that, but yeah, I had my exam yesterday and hopefully I passed it and I won't have to take that class again. I feel like I did okay, but I mean, yeah, you never know, right? Like there was I was reviewing my answers and there was one section of the test and I realized that I had not seen one critical part of the instructions and I would have had all of the answers wrong if I hadn't caught that and I had to go back and redo all the answers. So good times, good times. Anyway, um so I haven't been here and I'm a little behind. Uh, so today I wanted to do my August wrap up and talk a little bit about what I read in August, which was also just a little bit. So a little bit about a little bit. And I will be doing more videos hopefully in the next few days. I've got some tag videos to do, and I've been reading for Shorty September, so I will have a little bit of, uh, I guess, some Shorty September coverage on what I've read so far. But today is August, and I don't feel too bad because a lot of people are doing their August wrap-ups now, and I guess anytime before next August, it's probably acceptable to do an August wrap-up anyway. So, yeah, I didn't read very much in August. I read 3 books. Yeah, woo, yay me. Uh, yeah, like I said, the class took up a lot of my brain space and a lot of time. Work was very busy. But I did read Tom Lake, which I already talked about, and I will link to the video about that below. And certainly, I started reading it again and I read the first half of it again, and I haven't finished it a full second read. And I will probably read it several times. So I may talk about it again in the future because I think it's one of those books that has a lot to talk about. And I was coming off just that initial high of loving it so much and really enjoying it, but like I'd like to go back and read Our Town and reread the full book again and just think about it some more. But I really, really loved it. So you can watch my mediocre review of it. if you're interested. But I also read 2 other books in August, and one I have mentioned that I read before, and it still has the damn half price sticker stuck on it. That's not half price books, it was just a half price, because I bought it at the Waterstone sale, right after Christmas. Um, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which I buddy read with Roz at Scally Dandling about the books, and with BookTube supporter Stephanie. And we took the full month to read this, and I was not a great buddy to be buddy reading with. I participated some, but I didn't actually do my wrap up, so I apologize to Roz and Stephanie. But I'll talk about here some of my thoughts. I think that they sort of knew, and I did give a little final conclusion to them, which was that uh for me overall, I think I understand why it won prizes. I understand why it won the Women's Prize. I understand why it won the Pulitzer Prize. I There were parts of it that sort of dragged for me, but ultimately I was happy that I read it, and I felt like the ending was good. I liked the conclusion. I like how she's well, I want to say how she brought everything together, but I'll talk about that in a second. Um, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was a pretty satisfying read. Uh, I don't, this is a book that so many people have reviewed, and you know what? I'm going to put it down because it's heavy, and I'm not going to hold it up for 10 minutes or hopefully not more than 10 minutes. Um, it's a book that so many people have already talked about on BookTube, and they've already reviewed, and they've already sort of given hot takes on it winning the Women's Prize, winning the Pulitzer Prize also, and then not being nominated for the Booker Prize, and whether it should have been nominated for the Booker Prize or whether it should have won the Pulitzer Prize, and so I feel like there's been a lot of ground covered there, and I'm looking down because I have my notes in front of me. But one of the things that was interesting to me, I mean, I think the book is ultimately successful. I think, Barbara Kingsolver clearly did what she set out to do, which was to take the story of Appalachia and the opioid crisis there in that region and use David Copperfield to tell the story. And, she succeeded, I think, at everything that she set it out to do. And she really did. She did it successfully. I mean, she could have tried to do this and it could have failed miserably, but the voice that she created for Demon, especially, and his character, and how she worked in the other peripheral characters who were, pretty much mapped to characters who were in David Copperfield, but she really made them their own and really brought that atmosphere and those people and that life in that region of the country to life in the book. So I think, success there. It's interesting because when I was interesting. Oh boy, here I go. When I finished Tom Lake, I was looking for interviews and things. And Patchett did a short book tour, and so there were some events that had been recorded, and I was, looking for interviews and things like that about Tom Lake. And I came across an interview that she and Patchett had actually done with Barbara Kingsolver back in the fall of 2021. And it was the interview was actually like 4 days before Kingsolver turned in the final manuscript for Demon Copperhead. So, she hadn't been talking about it yet because she was just turning the book in. And I will link that video in the description box below. And so I watched that interview, and that is probably maybe, and Patchett says to her, "This is probably the first time that you're telling this story." And she says, "Yes, this is the first time I'm telling the story of how I decided to take David Copperfield and turn it into a novel that was about the opioid crisis in Appalachia. And she explained that she grew up in that region, that she lives there now, and that she has seen it has affected her life, and that she's been looking for a way for a while to tell the story, and that she was in London and she was staying in Dickens's house, and staying in Dickens's room. And she said, you know, she didn't really, she had been struggling and struggling with that story, and it came to her as she was in that room. I mean, you could say, if you want to be mystical about it, a voice came to her. She had an inspiration that was, have the child tell the story. And so she realized, aha, David Copperfield, and she started writing. And it worked. It was working for her, and it kept working for her. But then she sort of made a joke to Patchett, which she says, basically I subcontracted my plot out to Charles Dickens. So I already had my plot. I really also already had my characters. I just had to create my own, demon, or my own David, my own demon, and create that voice, and then the other characters, and map my story onto, like, just graft it onto David Copperfield. And that's when you think about it, that's pretty audacious. I mean, it's it's interesting. It made me think It made me think about, what if she hadn't had David Copperfield? I mean, to a degree, you could say the book had a lot of popularity and a lot of success because part of the difficulty of writing a story was already taken care of for her, because she just used the plot of David Copperfield. And, she is a writer who is already successful, who already has prizes, who already has a following. And then she is also taking a novel that is a beloved novel. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely, that could have turned on her as easily as it could work for her. It could work against her. And turning it into this modern story. And, but I kind of feel like, just, if she had found her own way into the story and written it, I still think it would have had some level of success, because she's Barbara Kingsolver. And then I think it's always then going to have a next level of success, because here is a beloved author taking another beloved author's work and trying to turn it into something. And so readers are going to be curious about that. What, how does that work? And some of the flaws, I guess, are some of the things in that book, like, that didn't quite work for me. And, like, I think also, I know Roz mentioned this as well, when we talked about the book, was that the section, there's a section that's a long drawn out section that is about drug addiction, and where Demon has a girlfriend who is, and they are both addicted to opioids. They're both doing a lot of drugs. And it really it feels like it piles and piles and piles and piles. And, certainly, Roz made a really interesting point, which was, well, maybe that's how addiction is. That's a reflection of addiction. I think that it was Roz that made that point. And maybe, but the thing about David Copperfield is that it was released in installments. So it was 20 different installments. And so you've got the fact of that the audience for David Copperfield, that, what he was exposing, they were not familiar with. There's that to start with. Whereas Barbara Kingsolver is putting out a book about a crisis that most of us were already familiar with from, from social media, from the news and news programs. It's not like, and from other books. I mean, it's not like we didn't know there was an opioid crisis and then Demon Copperhead opened all our eyes. Um, but with Dickens, I think he was doing. There was a certain level of exposure there that where the audience was probably horrified because they didn't have anybody else telling them what was actually going on. And but then they were also getting it in installments, and so they probably also didn't quite feel so piled on. When you're reading a novel, if you're like me, now I didn't read this quickly, but if I had been reading it if I hadn't had that class and work wasn't busy, I probably would have finished this in a week or less. And that would have been a lot. That would have been a lot. I mean, that really would be kind of piling it on. And so that's why I think about, people who say it's preachy. It felt like too much. It just felt like, oh, she just was like, yeah, okay, I get it. I think that goes a long way to just the big differences in the audiences for David Copperfield and the audience for today in a story like this today, is that this is something that we already were familiar with, and we already just feel a great deal of exposure to it. And we're reading it also in a different way. We're not getting it little pieces at a time. So I think that probably affects the reading of it to some degree. And then, my other thing that I kept thinking about was there's sort of an old saw in creative writing classes, which is sort of just because it's true doesn't mean that you should put it in your story that way, because sometimes the truth just doesn't work in fiction. And there were points where I kept feeling like, could we get some levity? Because it just seems like this kid, everything bad, especially the first half of the book. I mean, bad things happen in the second half of the book as well. Everything bad happens to Demon. Any and everything bad that can happen to a child almost happens to him. And it just felt like, yeah, okay. And we know, I mean, there are people whose lives are that bad. Yes, there are. There are people whose lives just don't have much good in them at all. But to have that in fiction, and to have it be affecting and not numbing, or to not have any levity or to not have any balance at all, it can just feel relentless. And I think that was another part of the why some people felt like this book was over the top, or it was preachy, or it was too much. And I do think that in a way, even though I said earlier, I think because she was Barbara Kingsolver, this probably would have, had some level of success. I think it would have been judged differently and more harshly if this was her book alone. I think the pacing would have been judged differently. I think that relentless darkness in a way would have been judged differently. I think I think for me, the character of Demon and the voice and that's my cat, if you can hear that in the background. I don't know if you can. She has her string. She has a string that she carries around and she wants to play. It's a whole thing. But I think, the voice of Demon was successful for me, and there were a lot of good things about the book. um, that she did with the character that I really liked, like his art and his artwork, and that being an escape. And I was really excited to see in the acknowledgments of Demon Copperhead that Barbara Kingsolver thanked Kayla Ray Whitaker, who is the author of one of my favorite books of all time, The Animators, because Kayla Ray Whitaker is from Eastern Kentucky. And so she is from that region. And her one of the protagonists in that book, or the primary protagonist in that book who tells the story, is a character named Sharon Kisses. And Sharon Kisses also comes from East Kentucky and follows a trajectory not unlike what Demon might have been dreaming about, because she draws, she does art, and she gets a scholarship to go to college to study art. And she ends up going to a fancy school in New York that's modeled on, I think it's modeled on Bennington. And there she meets Mel Vaught, who becomes her partner in her best friend and partner in creating animated films. And Mel Vaught is also, from a poor southern location. She's from Central Florida. And so together they take their collective history and who they are and where they come from and use that to fuel their art, the same way that Demon does in Demon Copperhead. And so Kingsolver actually thanked Kayla Ray Whitaker for insight both into um, Appalachia and into cartooning and to art and to having somebody who might be from that region and what that might look like for them. So I thought that was fascinating. I like that, and I always read acknowledgments because you just never know what interesting connections and tidbits and who people are going to thank and who they got help from, or what resources they used, or what books or different things they read. And so I thought that was really cool because I love the animators. And of the two books, I think the animators in a way is a better book, uh, just because I think it shows the after, and it's a different kind of book. But that's just me. So I really enjoyed it, though. I really did. Ultimately, I'm glad I finished it. I'm glad I read it. I'll probably read David Copperfield at some point in time. So yeah, yeah. So the other book that I read in August, because this is already getting so long, and I I cannot I need to start writing down exactly where I find books, because I think two different booktubers talked about this book and I ordered it, and that's The Stromness Dinner by Peter Benson. And I believe Shawn the Book Maniac, I saw him talk about this book, and also Angelia at Read and Reread. I think she had picked this up as well. Um, and I had it, and I decided to pick it up because I needed sort of a palate cleanser. And also I was rereading Tom Lake, and I was like, you need to read something else in August. You can't just say that you read two books or one book twice in August. So I picked this up, and this was absolutely delightful. This book is just so lovely. So Ed Beach, he runs a building company with his father. It's a family business. They do like renovations and additions and repairs and things like that. And he's in his late 20s and he enjoys his life. He likes what he does. He gets along with his family. And he gets approached by a guy to do some renovations in this guy's apartment. And the guy's kind of a posh, sort of a posh guy, lives in like a converted loft kind of place in a really swanky new building. And Ed goes in and does some work for the guy, and they sort of hit it off and they get along. And, Ed doesn't necessarily think any more of it. And then he receives a call from this guy, Marcus. Marcus says, hey, my father died and he had a property up in the Orkney Islands. He had a house where he lived, where he had retired to because he went there to paint. And I think, my sister and I own the house, but I think that we want to probably just clear it out and clean it up and then put it on the market and sell it. And so he asks Ed if he would do this work for him. And so Ed says, yeah, okay. He agrees to do it. And so he packs up a van and goes up to Stromness, this city in the Orkney Islands, to, clean up and renovate this house and get it ready for sale. And there's like a little bit of a mystery that happens while he's there. And it's just kind of a fun little subplot. But Marcus has a sister named Claire, and Ed has a bit of a crush on Claire. But Claire, I think she works in, if I remember, she works in uh, like finance or trade, or like risk management. That's it. She works in like risk management. And so she's in business, and she too is very posh and very well educated. And while he's renovating the house, she shows up. She comes to collect some things that she wants to take back with her, and the two of them sort of hit it off. And it's just, books like this are the kind of books that maybe, we just don't think much about, because it's a book where there's not necessarily a great deal of conflict. I mean, Ed is pretty happy with his life, although he would really love to be a chef. He loves to cook, he loves food, he does all the cooking for his family. But he's very close to his family. He has a pretty good life. He dates a lot of women, but he is at a point in his life where he's starting to think about what's next and kind of growing up a little, and yeah, maybe finding somebody and not always, going home with nurses that he meets at the pub. And he gets to see a kind of another world when he meets Marcus and Claire. And it's also interesting because there's the interesting, he's very aware of who he is and what his, I guess I'll just say what his class is versus, the sort of the level that Marcus and Claire are on versus who he is. He's a working class guy. He's from a pretty good middle class slash working class neighborhood. And sometimes he thinks maybe that's going to be a strike against him, but then maybe not, because people are just people. And I don't know, it's just so wholly likable. He's so great to spend time with. The atmosphere in this book is fantastic. It's told in the first person, and it's funny and thoughtful, and he's smart. And when he doesn't know something, he just says, hey, I don't know that. And he just tells the person, hey, to whoever it is, I don't know. I don't know about that. And, but he's willing to find out. And he's also willing to find out sort of more about who he is and who he could become. And it's just really, really fun, funny, just warm and touching read. So I highly recommend this, The Stromness Dinner. Yeah, I read it like in a day or two. I couldn't put it down because it's just so likable. And yeah, so that was my August. And here we are in the middle of September, and time is flying by. Anyway, I guess that's where I will close it. Let me know, what was your favorite book that you read in August? And I would love to hear. And if either of these, what you think about Did you read Demon Copperhead? What did you think about it? Do you think you're interested in reading the Stromness Dinner? I would love to hear. Or if you've read anything else by Peter Benson, I would love to hear that as well. Because I really like this author, and apparently he's written a number of books, and I really, really enjoyed his writing. So I would love to hear from you. If you just want to tell me what's going on, that's great too. And if you've made it all this way to the end of the video, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you, and I hope that you are taking good care of yourself, and I will see you again on the next one. Okay? Bye.